What's up guys? So I've made a financial guide for you guys because one of my friends was about to drop 25% of his savings on an endgame IEM, and I was like, dude, that's a horrible idea. And that's when I realized a lot of you guys are probably doing the same things, which is why I made the 136 rule. Now, how did I arrive at these three magical numbers? I based it off of the median income of the US citizen based off of the 2025 Bureau of Labor Statistics, as well as the IRS tax bracket, because we're gonna see how much money you have, excess money you have left after getting taxed for your average or yearly income. And I am using the median income because I think this is a more accurate depiction of the average Joe versus the average income, which is more screwed because you have to average out the lower numbers and then the super high numbers, and it's not as accurate as the median, which is why we are using the median. We're also going to ignore the outlier groups from age 16 to 24 because compared to the other groups, it is significantly less, perhaps due to it just being more part-time and you're not a full-time working adult. So we're going to ignore that for the sake of accuracy. With that said, the total median income per week across the 25 and above age groups added together and then divided by 8 comes down to around 1,268 USD. We then take the per week income and we times it by 4 for the monthly income of 5,072 USD. We then take the monthly income and we times it by 12 to get the yearly income of 60,864 for age groups after 25 and older. But we are still not quite done yet because we do still have to include the income tax of 22% at 60,864, which comes to around $13,390. So the after-tax median income after everything subtracting 13,390 comes to around $47,474 that we can use for our cash flow. So now that we have our after-tax median income, we now have to decide what percentage works that we can still have fun in the hobby without going broke and still paying our bills while saving up for our future. And after studying and reviewing the current share market, I've arrived to a number between 1 to 6%. This number is going to give you the variety, the value, the sound quality, the fun factor, the passion that you're looking for in this hobby without going broke, because it's still less than 10% of your total income. For example, the 1% rule is for beginners, casual audiophiles, someone who just got into this hobby. You're not quite sure you want to fully step into the IEM rabbit hole, totally understandable. For you guys, the 1% rule is more than enough. This puts you around $470 per year based off of the medium after-tax income, or $39 per month. As for the intermediate audiophiles who are a little bit more serious than the beginners, you're probably in the hobby for a couple months now, maybe a year, I would use the 3% rule here, which puts you around $1,400 per year or $117 per month. Then as for the hardcore audiophiles, you're gonna stick with the 6% rule, which puts you at around $2,800 per year or $234 per month. Now you can either save up and spend the full amount at once. For example, if you are a hardcore audiophile, you have $2,800 to spend all at once, or you can go month by month, like for example $234 per month every other month, which puts you at around $468, or maybe every other quarter, which puts you at around $700. Basically, this highly depends on your personal financial circumstances and how much cash flow you actually have available after your bills, because remember guys, you should be paying your bills first and then getting your IEMs. Also, feel free to mix and match with your budget. For example, if you are an intermediate, that gives you $1,400 per year. You can either buy like $300 IEMs, buy a good source, buy some tips, buy some cables, or you can just spend all of that on the Monarch or like a $1,000 IEM and then get like a DAC, some tips. So play around, do what you want, just as long as you're not going into debt for IEMs, you should be fine. Basically, the 136 threshold based off of the medium after-tax income should give most of you guys more than enough enjoyment, variety, value, performance, given the current competition and just how much IEMs you can get in the current market. Now, obviously this number can change depending on what is released in the future, so I'll probably make like a 2026 version down the line. But as for now, I think this percentage is a good range to stay at. Now, I know some of you guys might be asking, well, what if I want to spend more than 6%? Like, what if you are responsible with your money, you don't have that much responsibilities, maybe you're single, you saved up, you have a good amount of just like excess cash flow, expendable, or what I like to call it, burnable cash flow. Well, in that case, it is your money. I can't force you to not spend more, but my recommendation, given the current economy, inflation, job market, I would probably stick at 6% unless you are making more than the average median income. For example, if you are making more than the median income, let's just say $150,000, that still leaves you with like over $6,000 worth of IEM money, which is like triple the medium income budget. So with $6,000 at 6%, you really shouldn't be spending more than that. Like, you're chilling. You can get the Valhalla, you can get the LCDX, you can get like some other IEMs, some cables, and you would be perfectly fine. Like, unless you're buying multiple Storm level, you know, or Summit Fi headphones every year, you really shouldn't be spending more than 6%. Now, once again, it is your money, and if you are making well above the median income, like, you can afford the excess luxuries, right? Like 10 grand to you is only 10% of your income if you're making like 100k plus after tax. So do what you want, but 10 grand to me is already pretty overkill when it comes to headphones, and definitely an overkill when it comes to IEMs, because like, what are you buying for 10 grand? Like 2 Storms or something? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So 10% I would say is the maximum amount that like you should spend, even if you are making tons of dough. Now, for those of you who are saying 6 to 10% might seem a bit high, it's actually really not bad compared to other hobbies. For example, my car friends spent a minimum of 20 to 50% of their income on their cars. So 10% in comparison is actually pretty conservative in terms of like hardcore hobby spending. And I'm definitely not saying you should spend 20 to 50% of your income on audio gear. That is a horrible financial decision. But with that in context, it's not the end of the world if somebody decides to spend 10% on a hobby that they really love and that they get a lot out of. So 10% is actually, you know, not too bad, and 6% is actually very realistic, achievable, and the much safer and more financially responsible route that most people should be going for if you are deep in the hole. Now, for those who aren't from a Western country or a first world country with a high buying power, like, you know, China, Korea, Japan, someone from, I guess, like India, Bangladesh, developing countries, I would highly recommend you guys to stick within the 1 to 3% threshold. For an average worker in India, for example, in an urban city with like a decent wage, you're gonna get a significant cut to your budget compared to the average US citizens, just because of currency exchange, you know, buying power. You're not going to be able to buy the same amount of IEMs. So you can either take a hit when it comes to enjoyability and stick within the 1 to 6% of your income, or you could bump it up to around 10%, which is more realistic if you want to achieve like a similar, I guess, like quality of life, sci-fi wise, as the US or Canadian counterpart like me. It is unfortunate, but personally, I would still stick within 6%. I wouldn't spend too much in a developing city, especially. You're better off saving for your future, you know, spending on necessities, your family, you know, going out with friends, etc, etc, etc. Now, as for those who are working part-time or make significantly less than the medium income, I would highly recommend to stick with 1%, and if you have to, stick less than 3%. This does mean you're gonna take longer to get the IEM that you want, but you probably need that money for your necessities. For example, if you're in school and you're working part-time, you're making like 10k a year, definitely don't spend $1,000 on IEM. Like, use that money, you know, get a down payment on your car, save that for gas, groceries, rent, right? A lot of other choices before buying like a 1k IEM, right? Yes, your tax rate is lower, but you also have a lot less expendable income, and I would just not risk it. Like, don't be spending $1,000 and only have like 2k in your bank. But yeah, for the average working Joe, I definitely think 6% is a pretty fair number. Obviously, if you're making less than that, probably spend less on audio. You know, you definitely have bigger things to worry about, like your bills, responsibilities, and if you have kids and family, obviously I understand that number goes down as well. Aside from that, I hope you found this financial guide to be helpful. Make sure you're spending your money on your bills first, your savings, before you kind of like spend your excess cash flow on IEMs. And let me know if you think the numbers are a bit high, a bit low. What's your take on this? And I will see everyone in the next one. Thanks for watching.
Shout out to Dom Q, Rox Cat, B Urac, Disco Scaldus, Walker Standard, Patrick, User, Contain Guava Juice Gains, Mr. Gorillas, Polly J, Gis Sang Young, Christopher Jackson, Henry Claudia, Son of a Horse, 777ZK, Wizard, Obi, Trouble Extended, Frickalicious, Ricardo, Tapasar, Choco Norris, Shrimp Bacalet, Tomat, FKSRG, Cousin Fat Fat, Julius Phillip, Dead Riddle, Bilha, Nico, Addy, Michael, Trackstar, LL here, Shuri, Ryan, Raphael, I am J-Rack, Ori, June, Hakase, Torcog, Affinity, EGC, Raj, Chimika, Javier, CB952, Galbog, Senadan, Brian Carson, AK131, MN Gelato, Weiyu, Doichi, Mr. Combat, Robotic Sister, Vitor Kedge, Pornpoj, Varaya, Drewski, Edward, Alex, Kuna, Hussein, Brian, Robert, Polar, Marcos, The Surgeon, and some dude. Thank you guys so much for the support.